Today I will review the Chiaogoo Bambo interchangeable knitting needles. Together we will take a very close look at the tips, the joints, the cables, the quality of the bamboo and all the accessories that come with these sets. As always, this is a non-sponsored review. I bought this set myself with my own money, so let's dive right into it. The Chiaogoo Bamboo interchangeables come in this lovely little cotton pouch, and if you open it you can access altogether 13 needle tips. And then there's also this little leaflet which explains how this set works, and then you also get these plastic pouches where there you will find 6 cables all together. This set here starts at US size 2 or 2.75 millimeters, and then it goes all the way up to US size 15 or 10 millimeters. That is their size range. Here, if we look at the lower size range, these sets don't go below 2.75 millimeter knitting needles, so there are no 2 or 2.5 millimeter knitting needles, at least not interchangeable. And here on the front of these pouches there is a little compartment for the accessories. So there is a needle size gauge with a ruler. This is metric, here it's imperial. Then you get needle stoppers, keys, cable extenders, and of course stitch markers, but more on that later. As you can see, each of these 30 needles has its own little slot here. The needle size is embroidered onto these slots, and what's even better, here below there is another row of slots, so if you have spares, or these are the 5-inch tips and you bought some 4-inch tips for smaller diameter projects, or you bought some stainless steel needles, then you can add them to these sets. The only thing I'm sort of missing is a dedicated slot to store these cables. Of course, nothing whatsoever prevents you from storing these cables here in this front compartment. They definitely fit, but with all these accessories inside of that compartment, things are often a little bit crowded, so it might be a bit more difficult to find whatever you are looking for. Let's take a look at the main event first, the needle tips. So as you can see, the stalk and the taper, all that is made from bamboo in, as you can see, different colorations, and then here the connection piece towards the cable, this is done in stainless steel. As you can see, the needle size is engraved here on the stalks, and both in metric and the US size system, so that is really nice. And even if we go to the lower sizes, the writing is still big enough to read it. That's one of my pet peeves. You know, manufacturers write the knitting needle size on the stalks, but it's so tiny that you can't actually read it. The quality of the bamboo is reasonable enough, but as you can see, for example, this stalk here has these little discolorations here. And if we go to these larger sizes, so for example here in these 2 stalks, there is a full node right below the tips, and also here see the color differences. This one here is really dark, whereas this is light, and this is lighter yet. And yeah, so the quality of the bamboo is decent but not excellent. And here, if I align this tip here with my ruler, you can see that it's actually slightly crooked here. There is a gap, I don't know how well you can see this, a gap of around 1 millimeter. So by comparison, these were the Seek Knits knitting needle that I reviewed only recently, where the bamboo is almost flawless in here with these Chiaogoo bamboo sets. It's a mixed bag. It's not entirely horrible, and I think you as a casual knitter probably won't notice the difference anyway, but you know, it's worth pointing out. In terms of durability, I can't say a lot because they never snapped or broke for me personally, which doesn't mean that never happens. But here I picked the 2.75 millimeter knitting needles here just to see. I mean, you should be aware that these here will be flexible even if you don't exert a lot of force. Here you can bend them any which way, but that obviously doesn't mean they will snap at the lightest pressure. The tips of these Chiaogoo bamboo knitting needles are, if you ask me, very well done. So they are sharp but not too sharp. So here if I brush against these with my fingertips, there are no sharp angles, nothing that kind of pokes into my finger. So I think they would be nice for all those people who well, not constantly, but sometimes push the tips here. I don't think you will get seriously hurt in the long run. They also have a nice or decent enough taper here that is not too long and not too short, so quite nice and well balanced. And just to compare these for all these people who like the Chiaogoo tips, here on my right side, these are the Chiaogoo Sharp stainless steel knitting needles. So as you can see, the taper of these bamboo knitting needles is a little bit shorter. So here, this is where it ends. So I don't know how much that is, 4 millimeters, 5 millimeters. And you probably can also see that these tips here are a little bit sharper, but the main difference is that here the taper here is almost concave, where this here is more like, well, straight to the point. It's almost bulging out. So that is something you might notice with advanced stitches, but definitely not with basic stitches. But as I said here, if I push this, it doesn't really hurt. Here, of course, with sharp metal knitting needles, you quickly come to the point where this leads to, well, injury, I guess. Now here are some more comparisons. So this is Chiaogoo. This is Haya. This is Seek Knits, and here this is Knit Pro. So the tips of the Chiaogoo bamboo knitting needles here, the taper is quite a bit shorter compared to Haya, and you can also see that these are quite a bit sharper yet. Here, when compared to Seek Knits, well, there's a slight difference, whereas here the Knit Pro tips, they are blunter, but the taper is round about the same. Here towards the end of the bamboo bits, there is one thing I need to highlight. You can probably see this slight little discoloration here towards the end, and that is something you will find on most of the stocks. And I can only guess so, but what is happening here is probably that they connect these two bits, they fit the bamboo here into these stainless steel sockets, and afterwards they polish this little bit here so that no yarn, or here in this case my nail, won't catch. It's very, very smooth in both directions. I mean, slightly here I could feel that my nail catches, but other than that, this is actually very smooth. At the very end of these connector pieces, there is a little screw, and this can be used to attach the cables. And here is something I definitely need to highlight in this context. So The set comes with 6 cables, but only 3 cables are suitable to connect the large-sized knitting needles. Here, the other 3 cables have a small connector piece, so these large needles won't fit. You can buy connector pieces, adapters. You need to buy them separately. They don't come in this set. And then with these adapters, you could attach a large needle to a small cable. However, I do need to highlight that, of course, this means the total length of the knitting needle is larger. This means the minimum diameter of the projects you can knit with them will be higher, and of course you do end up with 2 transitions. You probably also want to know how good this part of the connection is, and I mean I've said it before, but I gladly say it again. I feel this is where Chiaogoo needles truly shine. They really know how to manufacture these joints. So here my fingernail doesn't catch, not even remotely. Maybe, I mean, in this direction a tiny little bit, but no, it doesn't. And here, as I said, this is also really smooth. And if we take a look at this connection here, the profile of this connection, you can see that here there's a little taper, and here, so there is a gradual incline here where the stitches can move across quite smoothly without catching things. And if I test this with a strand of yarn here, can you see this glides across this connection quite effortlessly? Here towards this is a swivel cable here. This bit here, this is where the yarn catches, or the needle catches the yarn a little bit, but the connection here and here, these are very nice. Of course, we can do the exact same thing with knitting here. As you can see, the stitches glide across this join here quite effortlessly. So this is well tapered, even down to the point where there is this little bead-shaped thing at the join. So this is quite lovely. And one more experiment, so I used some mohair yarn and 6.5mm knitting needles, and then here you can see that you can still push stitches to the knitting needle, but the swivel connection here towards the cable definitely catches those stitches. Not an entirely horrible way, but it definitely takes extra effort. That is something you should know if you are an avid lace knitter. Then these swivel cables might not be your best friend. Now let's talk about these cables, the cables that come with these bamboo sets. So as you can see, these are made from plastic, see-through plastic, and this means they curl. I mean, here, see, they curl. Not in an entirely horrible way, but in the way plastic curls. Pro tip, pour almost boiling water over them and then they straighten out. My main critique would be, okay, the set comes with 6 cables, but you have these L and these S connectors here, the smaller and the bigger bits. So actually it's just 3 cables, and then there are 3 cables. But as you can see, the first cable is 14 inches, the second is 22 inches, and the last one is 30 inches. So I wish they would include one cable that is a little bit longer, you know, if you want to knit a big lace shawl or a blanket or something like that. Sure, there is a cable, a connector, there is that, but obviously that is always a little bit of a nuisance. So as you can see, these cables are see-through. They are made from plastic, and actually see-through cables make a lot of sense because of course this also means you can see your stitches or whatever through as well. Sometimes if you want to read your knitting or so, this can come in handy. Now I have to highlight that these cables here are swivel cables. They call them spin and they rotate in their sockets quite freely here. You can twist the knitting needles any way you want. For those of you that already own a Chiaogoo set, well, there is obviously good news. You can also attach the red twist cables to the Bambo knitting needles. I do have to say I wish there was the option that you could choose between these spin cables and the red twist cables, but there is that. Let's quickly talk about the accessories that come with these sets. So first of all, you get 4 cable stoppers. You can use these cable stoppers, so in case you need the tips for a different project, then you just attach them here to the end bits and you can use the needles for a different project. And one pro tip, so if you use pliers, then you can unscrew that here, and then here you get an additional free cable extender. See, it's the exact same bit. So in case you don't use this, you get some spares. And talking about these little cable extenders, I personally think these are really well done. I really like these cable connectors. So first of all, the fact these are swivel cables. So imagine you are knitting a shawl, which means all your cables are stuck in the stitches. And if this here doesn't rotate around, this means you would have to rotate your whole project. Try that with a big scarf, shawl, blanket, and you know how annoying it is. But there is, I mean, they are tiny, but there is still a place for a key, so you can really screw that tight. So if we take a look at the final connection piece here, as you can see, it's barely an inch long. The transitions are smooth, and I can't highlight this little keyhole here enough because some manufacturers, I'm looking at you, Haya, don't have this little keyhole here. And then if you pair that with spin cables, it is almost impossible to get these undone. And this here is really well done. Then there are 2 little cable keys here to screw things tight. Don't overdo it, obviously. And then you have this little gripper here in case your hands are a little bit more slippery. These here didn't, well, in my old stainless steel sets, these grippers weren't included, and I really appreciate that now apparently they are. One of my pet peeves, or rather 2 of my pet peeves. First of all, please add 4 of these cable keys. They are easy to produce, so why not include more? And then, I mean, why is everything in plastic bags? A while back someone said, well, apparently it makes packing these sets a lot easier for them, but here I just used a little bit of scrap yarn to string these stitch holders on this little string. There's no plastic needed. We are knitters. There are better solutions than these plastic bags, especially as these they are not meant to last, and especially if you store a sharp key like this in a plastic bag, what will happen? Well, it just pierces through and this little bag will disintegrate. And talking about these stitch markers, I personally feel they are, well, almost useless. So you can see how thick that plastic is. So when you use them, what will happen is that the distance between these 2 stitches through that stitch markers, they are getting pushed a little bit farther apart than all the other stitches, and this will be slightly noticeable later on. So this will change your gauge. So I personally actually prefer offer these clippy stitch markers that you can remove later on. But even if you don't, for whatever reason, I would always opt for a stitch marker that is as thin as possible. And these plastic stitch markers, especially when you go here to these super fine knitting needles, they are just too large. There's just too much to spread stitches apart. I cannot recommend using them at all. And then there is, of course, this little needle gauge. I've said this before, I don't know what this is. It's just too flimsy. So as a ruler, it's all but useless because it's so flexible. And even here, these holes, because it's so thin, they will wear out over time because not all knitting needles are the same size. So here, these are 6.5 millimeter knitting needles, but as you can see, they are actually 6.57 millimeters. And you know, it's not like there aren't any other options. For example, this is the needle gauge Knit Pro adds to their sets. The Mindful sets, and Higher also has similar needle gauges that are a lot better and sturdier. Now, what about the knitting qualities? So I feel these needles are super lightweighted, very warm in your hand, buttery soft, and they definitely offer quite a bit of resistance. So you definitely notice that they are quite a lot slower to knit with than with Bambo knitting needles. And here, as I push new stitches to the tip of the knitting needles, that requires, well, a bit more force or a bit more effort. So you definitely notice the grain of the knitting needles a bit. As I said here, if I push my tip against these tips, of course, I mean, if you push too deeply, that's definitely something you notice. But on average, these tips are well rounded and nice. One thing you will notice is here, as you brush your knitting needles against the underside here with the tips, you do notice the, well, how do you call that? The striations of the bamboo, these little ridges, you faintly notice them. So while knitting, you definitely notice that this is bamboo, that this is wood with all its pros and its cons. So if I compare these knitting needles with the Knit Pro Bamboo knitting needles, see here, this is the bamboo is a lot lighter, this is untempered bamboo, then they are a bit smoother. Because untreated bamboo, I don't know if you've ever knitted with it, it offers a lot of resistance, which means that stitches can't drop off as easily, but of course the stitches don't glide across the knitting needle as well. So the Chiaogoo knitting needles are definitely softer, but here those are the Seek Knit bamboo knitting needles, and maybe you can even see that the light reflects from these knitting needles even more. They are a lot smoother, to the point you would think that this is a hardwood knitting needle or something like that. So these Chiaogoo bamboo knitting needles, they are a nice middle ground for anyone who wants light, warm knitting needles, but they still offer a little bit of a resistance as you knit. So we are back here in my studio to sum up my Chiaogoo bamboo interchangeable knitting needle review. So overall, I would say this is a well-balanced set at a reasonable price. So I paid roughly 100 euros, that's round about 110 US dollars for a set that comes with 13 tips and 6 cables. I think that's fair. I mean, not cheap, but fair. In the US, it might be a little bit more expensive due to tariffs. I mean, depending on when you are watching this video. But according to a company spokesperson, they have, and I quote, taken the necessary measures to address the problem. Now, for my personal preferences, the needles are a little bit too slow and the surface is just not polished enough, but I can well see that this could work for people who want to feel a little bit of texture, want to knit at a slower pace, and or with yarn that is a little bit more on the slippery side. The quality of the bamboo is okay, well, perhaps a little bit below expectations. It's Chinese moso bamboo sourced in Linanan, and I mean, I have to be fair, I never had any issues with it either. Some needles could look a little bit prettier, but they never broke either. The joints are definitely noteworthy. They are super smooth, very polished, so that's what you are looking for as a professional knitter. And for me, the joints are also reasonably secure and they don't constantly come undone either. The cables are only decent. I mean, the spin mechanism works well for standard yarns, but really only okay, or rather on the lower end of okay if you work with lace yarns and other thin qualities. I really wish they would offer these sets with the red twist cables, but again, according to a company spokesperson, I quote, "It was purely a business choice not to offer them." Well, I mean, I guess it's nice to know that the red twist cables are interchangeable with these sets. So if you already own the stainless steel sets, well, you can definitely use these cables for this set. Personally speaking, I am not the biggest fan of the need for two different cable sizes. For the stainless steel sets, it kind of makes sense because they offer a much wider range of sizes down to 1.5 millimeters. But these here only go down to 2.75 millimeters, and other manufacturers like Knit Pro make their sets work with only one cable size, covering the same or a very similar size range. And the fact that they charge $10 for the adapters, so you can use a large needle with a small cable, well, it certainly makes you realize that the romantic story they share on their website, how two loving brothers work together with their elderly mom to create the perfect product for knitters, well, the story definitely seems to have more facets than that. So if you only plan to buy bamboo knitting needles and none of the other products, this will, at least it would make me a little bit hesitant to buy this set. Of course, there's also, this set comes in different versions. So there's also the S set, and it only goes up to 5 millimeters, and then you do only need one cable size. So if you never work with these huge needles, that definitely could be an option, and then I would be a lot more positive when it comes to the cables. These pouches are decent, so I'm not a big fan of zippers, and I wish there was a better solution to store the cables. And I will have to say that I'm not the biggest fan of the pattern of these pouches, of the fabric pattern. But I mean, they are well constructed and nothing to get excited about, but you know, nothing to complain about either. The accessories that come with the set are a somewhat mixed bag, so the needle gauge, the stitch markers, for me, they are a big miss, while the cable connectors and the cable stoppers are quite nice. Would I buy them again? Well, personally, no. So the needles are too slow for my taste, the grain of the wood a tiny little bit too noticeable, and most importantly, the tapers are just not long enough for the kind of patterns and stitches I enjoy most. I do have to say that these sets find a very nice middle ground between raw, rustic, untreated bamboo and super polished hardwood needles. They are light in the hand and warm to the touch, and those factors could be very nice for an advanced beginner and those that prefer to knit at a slower pace. Personally, my biggest ick is that the company is just so intransparent. So in preparation for this video, I did ask them a couple of questions, as I do before each and every one of my reviews. And I mean, this time they answered, but I only received random bromide in return. For example, I asked them whether all items are produced by them, and then the answer was, I quote, "While the majority of our products are made or assembled in our own facility, we do work with trusted suppliers for certain parts and accessories." I mean, what kind of answer is that? By contrast, I asked Seek Knits the very same question, and their reply was very straightforward. Well, we produce all needles, but our pouches come from a trusted supplier, and they are also made in Japan. That's the kind of answer I would have expected getting from Chiaogoo as well. I also asked them, well, is there nickel in these needles? Because you have to know, there are also fixed bamboo knitting needles by Chiaogoo, and those contain nickel in their join. So of course I wanted to know, is there nickel in the interchangeables as well? And here they replied, I can confirm that our stainless steel needles use surgical stainless steel and are hypoallergenic. We've never received a report of an allergic reaction. To me, that is a little bit too evasive, because by comparison, I asked Knit Pro the exact same question when it comes to their stainless steel needles, and they said, well, stainless steel contains nickel, and if you go to Wikipedia, that's very easy to confirm. But they said, well, stainless steel contains nickel, but we have never heard any issues from our customers. That's how you answer these questions, and not in this evasive way. It's all a little bit too intransparent for me personally, and I do have to say that we have yet to see a single picture of their factory. Again, all other manufacturers, Knit Pro, Adi, or the aforementioned Seek Knits, also producing in Asia, all feature their factory prominently on their website. And why wouldn't you? You are proud of your factory, proud of the workers that work for you, so you share that with the world. Now, I realize that this might be a little bit too nitpicky, and most consumers probably are not too concerned about these details. And if you just care for a decent hard product, I don't think you'll do any wrong with buying these bamboo sets. Anyway, if you want to know more, or if you want to read the full interview, I uploaded it to my Patreon account, and I'll add a link to the description below where you can read all my questions and all answers. And if you have any other questions, feel free to comment below. As always, happy knitting and enjoy the rest of your day.